Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is our first episode of Monthly Spelunking with Allison Paradise and Liam Gallagher. It's our very first episode, so please bear with us for any technical issues or jankiness because it's only going to get better from here. Um, we have known each other since September, and we came up with this idea in the last few months where we felt that the spiritual community on its own was, in my view, not the most inviting place. And what I feel is that we can make a lot of these concepts a lot more approachable, and we can use, things in movies, TV shows, and just general pop culture to make, I would say, somewhat esoteric concepts a little bit easier to understand. I'll give you a quick background about myself. I work in finance. I got to the point in my career where I felt extremely unaligned with where I wanted the universe to have me, and it got so bad that I was like, all right, if I don't make a change, I think the universe will make the change for me. I would say the biggest thing that caused me to really feel like I needed to change was about a year and a half ago, I had this four layer dream, like an Inception, where you kind of go down into like the fourth layer is a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And all I can remember was in each layer I died, and I get to the first layer and I'm like in this battlefield. I have like a mortal wound from my left shoulder to my right hip. I'm like my whole body's open, and I'm getting put onto this gurney, and then I wake up, and it was around 1:30 in the morning, and I'm like, wow, that was intense. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get up and go to the washroom. So I get out of bed. I take about two steps, and I start to feel like there is something seriously wrong with me. And I have to race back into bed. And I'm lying there, and there's this feeling kind of right in like the indent of your sternum, kind of right where your like heart center is supposed to be, or your heart chakra is supposed to be. And I'm rolling and I'm feeling like really weird. And I remember my wife waking up saying, Liam, are you okay? And then boom, I'm out. I've passed out. And I I'm out for like a while. According to my wife, I was out for like a minute. And then I wake up, and my in-laws were living with me at the time because I just moved back to Canada. They're at the feet of my bed. All the lights are on. My wife is out calling EMS. And then I just start to profusely cry. And I'm crying and I'm crying. And like all this stuff is coming out of me, tears and whatnot. And paramedics show up, and my wife and I laugh about this. They were like the hottest paramedics you've ever met. Like we both of us, we even talked about it after. Like, wow, these women are like very beautiful women. Um, I had to do an EKG in the bed to make sure that I wasn't having like a heart attack or something. And then I had to go to the emergency room and get a CT scan of my brain to make sure I didn't have anything. But because I had something similar happen to me in 2008, where I was watching a movie and I ended up essentially passing out the same kind of way. They were concerned that I had a larger medical problem. And so I actually couldn't drive for 4 months. If you ever meet my wife, I think I don't think anybody wanted to be my chauffeur, and she had to be my chauffeur. And you have to understand she's a doctor. So, she's having to ship me around and then also deal with her patients and whatnot. So I'm sure it was a stressful time for her. And I remember after that event, I decided to go back to meditating. I've been doing a spiritual journey for a long time, but this event itself felt like it was the most important event. It definitely shaped me and shifted me in where I was going. And so I decided to meditate. And when I was meditating, there was another, I could see this person in lotus position um, meditating with me, like looking at me. And I did this for a few days, and this being was still there, or the shape, or whatever you want to call it, this vision. And I work with a lady named Dr. Roshni Daya, and I've been working with her since 2020, and she's really kind of gotten me ready for all of this. And I asked her if she'd ever done a silent retreat before, and she said yes. I went to Vipassana, and I think like 2 days later I had applied. Week after that, I had gotten in, and on October 19th, 2023, I went and did a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat, and that's where I started to get a lot of experiential wisdom, and I actually was able to start living a lot more aligned with the universe and tapping into a lot of the intuition that exists in all of us. It's not like I'm some unique person. I think that's one of the biggest issues with spirituality, is that people are like, well, that person is different than me. It's like, well, no, like we all come from the same source. That's my opinion. Okay. Um, and if I can change, anybody can change. Like I remember when I was 19 years old or 20 years old, I wanted to make as much money as I possibly I could make. I wanted to be like a billionaire. I wanted to drive a purple Lamborghini. I wanted to essentially be Bruce Wayne. It's like, who doesn't want to be Bruce? I don't want to be Batman. I want to be Bruce Wayne, and not any Bruce Wayne. Like I want to be Christian Bale, Bruce Wayne. Like who doesn't want to be Christian Bale, Bruce Wayne? That sounds awesome. But that wasn't the life that I was meant to have, that I felt destined to have, and that I felt that I really need to have in this lifetime. And ever since 2023, there's been a lot of things leading up to this day, which is the first day that Allison and I are recording. And what I hope that we can do, and what I'm going to endeavor to do, is to be able to use the skills that I have, that I've innately have, to allow the listener and the viewer to feel like they can empower themselves to change. I think in spirituality, we spend way too much time telling people what to do or who to be or how to be. I always go back to the Buddha, when he figured out Vipassana way back in the day. And he'd been training with these people for 7 years, and he's like, yeah, I'm not getting where I need to go. So he goes and sits under the Bodhi tree and almost dies, and he learns Vipassana, and he clears all the sankharas away, and he could see every single past life he'd ever had. And the best is he does it, and he goes to the people he used to work with, and he's like, guys, I've figured this out. And they're like, no, you haven't figured anything out. And he's like, okay. And so then he just goes and builds his own little temple, and he just starts inviting people to learn his way. But the thing that was so wonderful about Gautama Siddhartha, the guy that people call Buddha, is that it was an invitation. It wasn't a proclamation. It wasn't a coercion. It was an invitation. He would say, if you want to learn, he's like, this is what I've learned. This is what I have to offer. I'm willing to teach you, but you should learn for yourself. If this is something that's great for you, then great. If it's not, that's okay. Like you don't need to do it anymore. And it was always an invitation. And that's what I really want this podcast to be, is an invitation to be curious, an invitation to look within yourself and say, hey, like, are there aspects of my life that I find interesting or odd, or I feel like the same thing keeps happening to me over and over again, and I don't know why? And what I really hope is that this podcast can help you identify those things and give you tools or remedies that are readily available. You can go watch The Never-Ending Story or Batman or any of these movies and get a lot of great spiritual tenets. You don't have to go and sit at the feet of the guru in the Himalayas to do it. You don't have to go do like a ayahuasca experience. If that's what you want to do, you can do that, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to microdose psilocybin. You don't have to go and like renounce everything and live as a pauper. Like it doesn't really matter. Like you can find a lot of these tenets in everyday life and in things that people, I would say, generally use to escape. But if you actually are present when you're doing them, you can find a lot of great wisdom in them. Anyways, that's kind of my background. Allison, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Okay. I love what you just said because I feel like it so aligns with how I also feel like I exist in the world without the pop culture understanding. So this will be a fun experience because I have almost no pop culture understanding. But those same lessons, they're present in every moment. They're reflected in every interaction, every encounter. And for me, it's a really beautiful experience. And I love sharing with people. So I feel very much the same way that this is an invitation and by no means a prescription. When I when I first started being, let's say, more serious about doing inner work, the person I met was really clear. He said to me, I'm not going to tell you anything. You have to make sure you want to actually do this. And so, of course, I was like, yes, I want to learn. I want to know. I'm really curious. Tell me everything. And he said, no, no, no. Sit with it. Really, truly, is this what you want? Because if it's not, it can be it doesn't have to be, but it can be rather disruptive. Um, so you have to know. It has to come from within you. It can't be something that's coming externally or something that you're doing for somebody else. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself spiritual. I feel like I've just had a lot of experiences and I'm trying to learn the language of spirituality, which I think is why it's so fun to be working together with Liam, because I also don't have a clear idea of what people are talking about sometimes in spirituality. So I have to find a way to translate it into something that I can understand. When I was younger, I had a lot of experiences that maybe science might have a difficult time explaining, or I certainly have a difficult time explaining or wrapping a story around. And when I was a kid, when I would say things to my mother in particular about things that I had experienced, she would tell me that I was hallucinating because I had an allergy. So I ended up with this very long list of allergies to medications and foods and all sorts of things, because I would, quote unquote, hallucinate or see visions or hear things. And that was her way of understanding and explaining them. And so for years, I thought, for example, I was allergic to alcohol because something happened, I don't know, a day or so after I had codeine. So I went through university absolutely convinced that I had an allergy to alcohol. So I never drank, which is not a bad thing, but it's actually just very funny. And by the time I was 12, though, after being told by so many people that these things aren't real, you're hallucinating, you're making them up, even though my dad would validate a lot of my experiences, we had a challenging relationship. And so I decided at 12, I just didn't want any of this anymore. So I intentionally cut off a lot of it and kept very, very little of what I like to call the magic, because it's for me, feels the cleanest. There's no story behind it. It just is this amazing magic that we get to experience. And by the time I had left grad school, so I went to school for neuroscience, but I studied more molecular kind of neuroscience, not the kind that people tend to associate with consciousness studies, because I thought that studying molecules might help me try to understand some of the experiences that I'd been having. It didn't. And it didn't help me understand human behavior any better. So I left. But by the time I left sort of academia, I was really convinced that anything to do with spirituality was bullshit. It was nonsense. And people who believed in it were, honestly, I would have said that they were like not right in the head. Like, something's wrong with you. Why would you believe any of this? So I moved to Los Angeles. I grew up on the East Coast. I moved to Los Angeles and I'm surrounded by crystals and people talking about energy. And like, I love Los Angeles, but I'm like, I don't know what's happened to people here. Like, they've lost their mind. It's um, and I probably would have persisted in that perspective if not for an experience that happened, I don't know now, probably 12 years ago now. I don't remember exactly. I had moved from LA up to the Bay Area. I was driving on Highway 280 and like from the South Bay up to San Francisco to go hear a scientific lecture at the planetarium. And I was I was thinking about Ebola because there had been an Ebola outbreak and it was on NPR. So I was listening to NPR and I turned off the radio and I was listening to a friend's CD and thinking about what it would be like if there were to be an Ebola outbreak in the US. How would I respond? And I recognize as I say this out loud, this is not like a common thing I think people think about, but it's a common thing in my head. What would I do in an Ebola outbreak? And my first instinct was to say, I wouldn't want to live through that. That sounds terrible. So I would probably find a way to commit suicide. This is what my like brain is, or my like whatever my logic is saying. And something just came over me and took control of the whole situation. And I don't really have words for it. Somehow everything became very clear. And I saw the meaning behind everything, the truth behind everything, what it really was. I had no sense of self. I was completely immersed in the truth of the universe. The words here are really, really difficult. And it was profound. And I have no memory of pulling over to the side of the road. But when I kind of came out of this trance or whatever happened, I came out of it. I'm pulled over to the left shoulder and I'm crying. And so being a very good scientist, I call my husband and tell him I have a brain tumor. Because it's the only logical explanation for what I just saw. He thankfully said, no, that's probably not what happened, and directed me to go for a walk instead. And I was defiant. I was like, fine, I'll go for a walk, but then I'm going to go to a hospital because I have a brain tumor and something is seriously wrong with me. Like, I was like, do you understand the whole world got really, really bright and sparkly? That's not normal. Yeah, I didn't have a brain tumor. And everything really changed after that. But I didn't want to pursue what other people had to say about experiences, which is why I feel like I come at this from a really different perspective. So I've read some books, I've studied some things, but I wasn't all that interested in other people's experiences. I wanted to know my own. I want to know myself first. And sometimes it can be really useful to have somebody else as a mirror to reflect back things about yourself. But I had gotten to a point where I just wasn't finding that useful anymore. So for years, I didn't read anything, I didn't watch anything, didn't listen to anything, which is how I know so little about pop culture. But it's given me a different kind of perspective that sometimes I find can be really useful. So I'm excited to share that.
Yeah, and I think that like what comes to me with that is I think as a kid, I think a lot of children feel this um wall with their parents. And it's not, I want to be very clear here. It's not their parents' fault. Okay, so every parent in my view does the best they have. It's just if they have no skills, then that's the best you got. Um, and there's no like store to return bad parents. It's not as if you come into the world and you like unwrap your parents from some box and they're like, hello, like I'm your parents. And then you have some receipt and you can be like, these parents suck. Like my dad's an alcoholic. my mom essentially is unempathetic, and like I want to return them for like, very open, very loving parents. It's just like, no, that's just not how it works. How it works is that you're here to have your experience, whatever that experience may be. And what happens is there's lots of things that happen in society where, you're a child and you cry, and the first thing you hear is don't cry. Don't feel that way. It's going to be okay. It's like, okay. And if you have that reinforcement consistently, you start to wall off that side of yourself. If it's even to the point where you start to have magic like yourself, Allison, right? It's actually almost, in certain respects, dangerous to talk about it. I always go back to the movie with Matt Damon, Hereafter. So in Hereafter, Matt Damon, when he was a child, he ended up getting I think he got meningitis. And when he was on the operating table, he had this thing in his neck. They're trying to operate on him. And then when he was on the operating table, he actually dies. And then he comes back. Okay. But he was pronounced dead for a while. Not like days, but, like minutes. But then he comes back. And then he started to have these like horrific headaches, like awful, awful, awful headaches. And then one day as a kid, he ended up touching his friend's hand, and he sees his friend's father or mother, I can't remember which one, which adult, which parent it was, but who had died. And so Matt Damon became a medium. And he talks about in the movie that, he's telling his parents these things. His parents think he's a lunatic. So then he has to start taking these drugs because he's like, "Oh, I can't be touching people." It's no different than in the movie with what's that guy's name? He was in Die Hard. Bruce Willis. I think the movie's called Unbreakable, um, where Bruce Willis is actually a superhero. He can't die, and there's this guy played by Samuel L. Jackson called Mr. Glass who has been trying to find him because he's been setting up, plane crashes and train derailments and whatnot to find this man. And what Bruce Willis has is he has he's extreme strength, but he also has this ability to, when people touch him, he sees all the bad things they do, which is an extreme burden. Okay, like imagine you just bump into somebody in the street and you see their deepest, darkest secrets. And for some people, it's like, okay, whatever. Like in the movie Unbreakable, like it's like some lady shoplifting, okay. But in other ones, it's like very dark. And I think that so similar to Matt Damon in Hereafter, he ends up taking these drugs. He ends up essentially walling off all of the magic that he has. And then he gets to a point where he was like, okay, like I either need to commit to being this who I am, because he also doesn't feel that great on the drugs. And he's like, I either just commit who I am, like the medium, I can see the dead people, all that kind of stuff, or, like go the other way, which is probably not the way I want to go. And so he commits to it. So great. So then he becomes this medium, and, his brother's all excited and he's helping them and he's getting all these people to come. And then he essentially is like, then he renounces it again, right? He doesn't renounce his skills, right? He walks around with gloves on because he can't touch people. And he's very careful about, dating people and all this stuff because he's got these powers. And he essentially goes and works at the docks, which is actually really funny because it's kind of like him in Good Will Hunting, where he's like, I'm just going to lay brick. And it's just like, no, like it's funny how Matt Damon plays these like, supernatural characters. And well, that one, Good Will Hunting and whatnot. But, he renounces it. He renounces it. And it's just because it's like, it's a lot, like it's a lot when you have things that are unexplainable, and they're not ubiquitous in the world. And what I mean by that is that, like I believe that, Jesus Christ and all these guys existed. Okay. But it doesn't mean that everybody gets to turn wine to water. Okay. It doesn't mean that everybody gets to walk on water. It doesn't mean that everybody can go and look at leprosy and just touch it and it goes away. Okay. That experience is true. It's no different than the telepathy tapes that recently came out, right? It does not mean that becoming telepathic is a skill that everybody can achieve. You may be able to achieve it, but it may be one of those innate kind of God-given things, no different than like Michael Jordan or Connor McDavid or Sidney Crosby or LeBron James. Like those people who are very, very good at sports have an innate just God-given trait that I don't care how long you spend in the gym or how long you work on your skating, you're just probably never going to be like that guy. But back to the magic part, like having that ability to see and be able to, talk to people on the other side that Matt Damon was able to have, it can be a very heavy burden in this world. Because you know, like there are people called indigo children. Okay. And so when you come into this world, this is my view, but there's scientists who've talked about this. Because you're so open, okay, and because you come in as a soul and you're essentially as a child, right, when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, right, you're so much living in essence than ego that you really tap into some pretty crazy things. And indigo children are people who can like talk about their past lives, right? Like whether it's a birthmark and they can say, oh, well, I actually were like, that's where I lost my leg. Or, like there's one that I read about with this girl who was, really interested in Paris, and her mom was like, oh, we can go there. She's like, no, no, I can't go to Paris. And her mom's like, oh, why not? And she says, well, that's where I lost my head. And, to a parent, right? To a parent, you have to think about this, right? Like imagine you're like a lawyer. Okay. You're like a lawyer. Okay. And your child says that to you, and you have never had an experience like that. Or like maybe you had experience like that when you were 6, but like the difference between now and call it 60 years ago was you were probably beaten or put into some institute, or even worse, had lobotomy, done on you. And so you hear this from your child and you're like, you know, like I'm a pretty open human being. If my kid said that to me, I would, in the moment, especially imagine you just like came home from work, like you had been like doing some like soul destroying job for like 9 hours that day, and your kid is this like, just like so innocent and says, yeah, I can't go to Paris because that's where I lost my head. You'd just be like, and what you did that day was like write up some contracts so some oil company can like drive a pipeline through some community. Like, I don't know, right? Like I think that that's the juxtaposition, right? And I think that's where, when you were talking about the magic that you had inside you, um, I think that there's a lot of experience whereby it doesn't have to be like so magical. It could just be curiosity. Like when you're a child, I remember I used to like wait for my mom to get home, because I didn't talk to my dad about this stuff, because my dad was an engineer, and I think my dad was very good at figuring out a way to get out of talking about stuff. Okay. Especially like, because he would give, I'd go to my mom and I'd be like, hey, why is the sky blue? And she was very, very good at being like, well, like, there's, like there's color and there's light, and it reflects off of this. And like, like when you see this is, and so she would actually be very curious with me. Whereas my dad would be like, well, there's nitrogen, and then there's this, and then like there's this chemical process, and then like this is what it is. And then there's nothing else to talk about. Like there's like, you can't be like, oh, okay, well, what happens if it wasn't 75% nitrogen? It was like 75% sulfur. I don't know. That'd be a horrible way to live. Like it'd smell horrible here, but there's no conversation with that. Um, so I would like wait for my mom to get home, and and she was a lawyer, and she would be working all day, and then I'd get home and I'd be like, mommy, and I would like just go, and she would be like, oh man, like, okay. And I give her a lot of credit, right? Like for a really young mom. And not that we had like, not that we didn't really have a whole lot back then. And so she's probably just like exhausted. And then I come home and I'm this ball of curiosity being like, I saw this and I saw that and I did this and I did that. Like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What do you think of da, da, da? And like, that's magical. That level of curiosity is magical. Okay. And then what happens, not like rightfully or wrongfully, right, is that you get to a point as a kid where you're like not actually getting the reciprocation. So then, so you don't get the reciprocation. And so then it's like, okay, well, maybe I don't do that anymore. Maybe that's not the right way to do things. Or maybe it's like, hey, maybe like I'm different and like, you know, we all want to conform. Like we all want to, you know, fall in line, right? It's like we all want to be another brick in the wall, like as Pink Floyd likes to say. I think that it's very radical to be individual. It's a very radical thing, especially when you're like four. You're like, well, this is the only perspective I have. It's like they don't want this. It's like, okay, they're like, all right, you have these visions and these hallucinations and you see things. It's like, I don't have that. Your dad doesn't have it. And your sister really doesn't have that. So, like, maybe you're actually the problem. Maybe you're not like, maybe you need to change, right? Like, maybe we're right because there's three of us and there's one of you.
Oh yeah.
It,
They used to tell me I was switched at birth and their real daughter was somewhere else watching television and that I was like a mistake in the house. This is like a common narrative.
which as like a 5-year-old, you're like, wow, this is like that's sad. You kind of like, when people like, there's that scene in Arrested Development where there's a lot of those scenes where like someone will like make fun of Tobias and Tobias is like, I'll be right back. And then you just see him profusely crying in the shower and like just like and not like the crying where you're like just like I mean like sobbing like oh like he's just sobbing in the shower. But that's kind of the experience. You're like, oh, okay. I
Yeah, it's
guess
not nice.
no, it's not nice at all.
I mean, it's even up until I would say like really up until maybe like 5 years ago, it still would be really affecting. It's hard to have your family say something like that.
Yeah, well, I agree. And I think that it's hard to feel like an outsider.
Yeah, it is.
Like I always felt like I looked at the world differently than my parents and I would push them on things. And I was very antagonistic, like very antagonistic, like I remember I'd say I was a sensitive kid. Okay. And like being a sensitive guy is not it's being a sensitive guy in the early 90s was like not particularly the way to go. So then what ends up happening is then I end up becoming this like, you know, very low self-esteem, but very much like very loud, very much wanted to be heard, had the loudest voice in your face. I might even be a bully, right? Just to fit in. And I remember I bullied this one kid. I remember I took his jacket and I threw it in the mud and jumped on it. And it was just like, why am I doing that? That's just so mean. And here's the funny part. The universe is a very funny thing, right? I end up switching schools and then I'm the one that getting bullied. And this kid's actually friends with me. He's actually nice to me. Like, imagine that. Like, imagine the grace that that child has to have to, I was this not very nice kid to him, to have the grace to be like, yeah, I'll walk home from school with you. Yeah, I'll like, you know, you actually are able to then share like share the fact that it's like, oh shit, this sucks. It's like, I don't want to do that to somebody else. And it's also really hard to have that happen to you when you're like 11. And so, um, I would always push my parents. I would always be very argumentative and, I didn't really look at the world maybe the same way they did. But then what I did was because my parents took such an interest in my life, Um, and they were like, hey, I think that you'd be good at this. I think you'd be good at that. You end up saying to yourself, well, if they think that, then I should believe that too.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you kind of start to go a lot further away from like that source. And um and you start to just kind of live your life like that. It's kind of like Alan Watts, where it's like, you come into this world and then you go to this school and that school and you go to university, then you become an insurance salesman or something like that. And then like you're 50 and someone comes up to you and says, sir, like you didn't do it. You were supposed to dance. And it's like a huge slap in the face because you think you're doing the right thing. You're like, or like as Ram Dass said, right? Like he's like, I felt like I was in a suit that was 5% too tight for me. But I'm walking around the world and everyone says, nice suit, good suit, nice suit. And you're like, well, if they all think it's a nice suit, I can deal with the 5% tightness until you can't.
Yeah, until you get sick or it suffocates you.
Yeah, exactly. Until you can't. Until it's like, it's, you know, or like, or like even like in the extreme example, the universe is like, I'm really sorry. I think you need to redo. Like he went so far off the line that it's like let's kind of get you back here. And so um so yeah, I think that when it kind of starts as a kid, I really believe that my view, like every single kid is spiritual up until a point. Up until there's a point in which the ego shows up, then it changes, right? Because you absorb so much as a kid. You're just sucking in all the energy and all the information you possibly can. And so for a long time, you're just this like high vibrating, awesome kid. Um, maybe that only lasts for 6 months. Maybe like by the time you're 6 months into your life, you've been corrupted, or like maybe it starts in the womb with the whole fetal alcohol syndrome thing. But I think that you know, I really think that you are spiritual at some point in your life, especially early in your life. And then, the world comes on and the ego shows up and, you start to feel pain and all this pain and suffering from whatever your experiences are. And then the ego's like, yeah, like this is like my role. I got to help protect you. And you create these walls and these maladaptive qualities and these coping mechanisms. And then you're like an adult and you're like, oh, okay. You kind of wake up and you're like, why do I have the same relationship that my parents have? Or like, why are the same things happening to me over and over again? And why do I feel like when I look at my dad, I'm just really angry because I feel like I'm becoming my dad, but I don't even know how that happened. Or a lot of different things like that. And I think that that's kind of what I think you and I are endeavoring to do, is saying, hey, like you can come back to the source. You can bring yourself back, and however that way is for you, right? Like, or you can sit here and say that we're nuts, like, but don't take our word for it, right? Like you need to try it on your own. And
I think you could reframe some of the way that you, or like a different perspective.
yeah.
Words, right, of what you said, of kind of the way I see it is when we're younger, there's so much more, let's say, plasticity and openness in our ability to take in new experiences, and everything feels really new. But what happens over time is we lay down behavioral patterns in response to things. Very similar to what you said, that we learned, for example, that if we say this, it upsets our parents. And so if we are in a space where we want to upset them, we say that. And if we're in a space where we don't want to upset them, we don't say that. But we learn these rules. And then we end up, by the time, I would say really by the time most kids are 8 or 9. So I work with kids. I didn't say that initially, but I work with children and young adults. So I see this a lot. By the time kids are really around 8 or 9, they've embodied so many of these behavioral patterns that a majority of their expression is actually kind of pre-programmed. and you can almost predict exactly what they're going to say or what they're going to do based on their experience, their history. I mean, this is why psychology is so effective, because we have a set of pre-programmed responses as humans. We don't actually have to have those. So a lot of the work that ends up happening when people are older, and the work we try to do with kids when they're younger, so they don't have to do it when they're older, is to go back and kind of undo a lot of those patterns, those programs, to figure out what's actually the true response. What would 2-year-old you have responded like? And you had said something earlier about crying, and I feel like that's I love crying as an example, because little kids, really little kids, right? They have no inhibition. They're upset, they cry. They cry really hard, they cry really intensely, and then it's over. You get it out. But as adults, like just the other day, something happened and I was sad, so I was crying, and I went out and saw some people, and every so often I would just start to cry because it was just wanted to come out. And oh my gosh, the fear of, why are you crying? How do we make it stop? Please, can we make this stop? And you're going, wow, like it's okay. The tears are great. The smiles are great. It's all just information that we let it pass through. And you watch kids and you see what's actually natural. And I would also add that kind of one of the things you said when we first started is this belief you have that we all have kind of this capacity to access something greater in ourselves. And I feel like that's so true. And I see it all the time. When I started having experiences again, I met with a medium called Paul Selig, who's a lovely human. And I was explaining some of the things I was experiencing. And he said to me, in no uncertain terms, he said, you need to remember you are not special. Like, I loved him for saying that, because it is so easy. But I think we see it with the telepathy tapes, to just put people on a pedestal because they have experiences or abilities that maybe we feel like the majority of people don't have. And it's just simply not true. It's just people don't access them. They suppress them. We found that, I think it was 40% of the kids we work with, without us prompting or asking them, have had some type of experience that we would consider to be spiritual or psi or whatever. 40% without even asking. So think how many kids are actually having these experiences. It's a lot. It's actually super common. And then we just shut it down so that we could be like everyone else.
No, for sure. I think it's very sad. Like I think I think the pedestal thing is really important. Like there's this great documentary called In Search of Greatness, and they interview like all these great athletes like Wayne Gretzky and whatnot. And I think that there's this human belief that like, it's funny, like we're awed by some things, and then some things we're like, those things need to go away. And I would say that like athletes, and I mean like elite athletes, okay? I don't mean like the dude that's the sixth or seventh guy off the bench, okay? I'm talking about the like people that you can only count on your hand in the league at that specific time, that can do things that get you out of your seat every game. I'm not talking about once every blue moon, because every person has, like, everybody has that ability to like do something incredible, okay? I'm talking about they do it every game. Like Michael Jordan did it every game. Every game Michael Jordan played, he did something that you were like, that is otherworldly. Connor McDavid, who plays for the Edmonton Oilers, he does something every game that you're like, what was that? And how do I get to see that again? And it's interesting because in the documentary In Search of Greatness, like they ask Wayne Gretzky, they're like, they asked him, he's like, yeah, so I used to like sit when I'd watch hockey and I would just draw. I would just watch the puck, and that's all I do. I just draw the puck, do this, do that. It was an intuitive thing. And And then he like look, he said, okay, like he would be able to determine who won the game or played the better game based on like where the puck was. Okay. And so then what Wayne Gretzky was so good at is Wayne Gretzky controlled the puck better. Like so when he was playing hockey, right? Like this was in an era where like you would give up control of the puck when you would go into the offensive zone to then hit the person and get the puck back. So that doesn't really sound that smart. So Wayne was like, that's dumb. I'm just going to take the puck in and keep it. And I'm going to do whatever I can to get that puck from you if I ever lose it. And you know, Wayne Gretzky has more assists than anybody has points in the NHL in history. So if Wayne Gretzky didn't score one goal his whole career, the amount of assists he had would be the most points in NHL history. So when you add on the goals to it, it's like he is so far ahead of everybody that no one thinks that anybody will ever break his like total point record. But what he was saying that like, you know, it's like I had a parent come up to me once and say like, what did you do to like become so good so that I can tell my kid what to do? And Wayne was like, I just did it because that's what I thought I needed to do. It was an intuitive thing. He was being guided in my view. And you know, maybe Wayne would admit this, or maybe he wouldn't. This is my opinion, but he was guided by something that what he was tapping into something bigger than himself. And he was being moved this way. And there were so many things that happened in his life that were serendipitous. And he even talks about it. He was like, you know, getting this coach when I got this coach, or, you know, having this happen when this happened, or, you know, whatever it was, right? You need serendipity, but you also need to be able to have this unconscious, subconscious connection with the ether or whatever you want to call it to then guide you going somewhere. Because I can tell you that it exists. It's existed in my life and it's existed in your life. And okay, maybe we're 2 people out of 8 billion people or how many people live on this earth that only have this. But like I can tell you that there's lots of things in my life where I'm like, I don't know why I need to do this, but I'm doing it. And I don't know why I see the things I see, but then they happen. And I'm like, this is weird. You know, it's like I'm having deja vu that I have deja vu again. It's like, that's odd. Okay, move on. But the more you kind of go within, the more these things happen. And the more you are outside of it in the external, the less you're kind of tapped into it. And I think this kind of leads to a really interesting concept that Dr. Roshni Daya and I talked about at length. It's just like the difference between content and process. So when you're in content, okay, you see it all the time when you're talking to someone. It's like you're talking like this, okay? Just like this. It's like, you know, you're talking in content when you're not even listening to the other person, you're just thinking about what you want to say next because you don't even care what that person's saying. You're not actually open. You're not actually curious. You're just like, no, I need to make my point, and my point's the point that matters. And you wouldn't admit this, but you don't even care if they agree with you. It's just like, I just want to do this. It's kind of like when you see like a bunch of really old men sitting at a table just yelling at one another, right? And then they get up and leave like, that was a great lunch. It's like, yeah, just full content. Whereas process is different. Process is where you're in this perpetual process in your life where you're kind of going deeper and deeper and deeper, and you live in a curiosity. And I want to be very clear. This is not where someone asks you a question and you say a question back. Okay, this is not the 40-year-old virgin where Seth Rogen teaches Steve Carell how to pick up women by just literally being very mysterious and only ever asking a question. There's this scene where he's in a bookstore and Steve Carell, this girl's like, oh, like, what's your name? And he's like, what's your name? She's like, well, my name's this. He's like, are you sure? Yes. And she's like, what are you reading? What are you reading? And she's like, oh my God, like, can I give you my number? You want to give me your number? She's like, I do. And she like writes it down, gives it to him. And then he like runs over to Seth Rogen and he's like, I can't believe that worked. He's like, it's amazing. And he's like, hey, do I call her? I was like, no, you never call her. Just like move on. I'm like, that is not what I'm talking about here. Okay. What I'm talking about being in process is where you kind of get into that dance with life where you become curious about the things that are happening to you. You're actually very open, you're very perceptive. You're starting to see, hey, like, are there patterns kind of happening over and over again? You know, in all the situations I'm in, do I feel this? Do I feel like I'm talking up here, or do I feel like my voice falls down into my heart? Do I actually feel like, yeah, I'm actually speaking from my power, my truth, or am I just kind of talking up here? Do I feel like I'm trying to convince somebody of my own actions, or or do I feel like I actually believe what I'm doing? Do I feel very connected to what I'm doing? And, then you can kind of really start to kind of live your life in process rather than like lamenting, like, why is my life like this? Or like, man, I hate this. Or like, man, like, if it was just different, it's like, well, you know, you play a part in this, you know, it's not all random. You play a part. And that's how, when you get into process, you start to see things like, oh, I have this entanglement over here. Like back to what you were saying about children, you create these entanglements as a kid. They're like subconscious, unconscious entanglements. And how I view them is it's like you have a vine, okay? It's like a white looking vine. Okay. And it's energy. It's not like a solid vine that grows up a building, or like the vine that like gets people in Jumanji to like suck them into them. It's the yeah, that's a really cool scene in Jumanji, actually. It's like there's this like plant that eats people and like has these vines that grabs your leg and tries to, it's cool. Anyways, great movie. If anybody's ever seen Jumanji with Robin Williams, it's a great 90s movie. Um, but it's like a light looking, or like a light looking vine, and it wraps itself around you. But you are also wrapped around it. Okay. So it's a symbiotic vine. And so what you'll find is that like in certain situations, when someone spins, you actually start to spin. You don't even know why you're spinning. You won't even know that you're spinning until, like, that's the whole thing. It's like, it's like you go and see your brother and he says something, and then boom, out of nowhere, you're yelling at the guy. That is what I'm talking about in an entanglement. And these entanglements get created all the time, like they, but you can also get rid of the entanglement as well. You have to see the entanglement. And so these entanglements that I have as a kid, right? They're subconscious, unconscious entanglements for the most part. They're not conscious entanglements. It's not, you're not saying to yourself, like, I think that I should entangle myself with my mother so that whenever my mother's mad, I'll be mad too. I don't think anybody thinks like that. But these entanglements that happen, um, like, you can be driving down the road and out of nowhere you're like, why do I feel so like mad? Or like, why do I feel so upset, or whatever it is, right? Like these are the things I'm talking about. And they did like scientific experiments with quantum entanglement where like they took two electrons and like entangled them and shot this one electron out like far, far, far out. If my wife was here, she'd be laughing at me because I'm not a scientist. I didn't really take any science in high school. I only took chemistry. But what they found was when they'd spin the electron, the other electron that was close, that was the other electron that was here, and if they spun the one way out there, this one would spin too, and vice versa, right? So this is kind of what I'm talking about. Um, you create these entanglements with people, and then you just live your life. But you don't even know why things are like, why you're angry or why you're upset. It's like, why did I yell at that person? Like, I didn't want to yell at that person. And then the other thing too is that you don't fix it because you don't go apologize, because you're like, well, I can't apologize to that person because they're also in the wrong too. It's like, so then you just kind of keep the entanglement going. So anyways, that was a lot anyways.
Yeah, that's very true. If we even think to ask why, I think a lot of times when things like that would happen in my life, I would be really indignant. Right? I'd be like, no, you're wrong.
Yes.
I'm right.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
a terrible person. You just don't realize it.
Correct.
I am a saint.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think that that's kind of where the ego is, right? The ego is just like, hey, I want to protect you, right? Like, I think this whole idea that the ego needs to just be eradicated, in my view, it's like that. Like, look, Like if we are the universe individuated, it means that we're whole. Okay. It means that the ego is part of that wholeness. Okay. I think the big shift that happened to me was realizing that I was like, I don't want the ego driving my bus. You know, you gotta have you gotta have some empathy for your ego. He or she is just doing what he or she thinks is right. And in reality, let's say you grew up in an alcoholic home, okay? And you had an alcoholic dad and you're 5 years old, let's say, or 6 years old. And like this person is not safe. And let's say you've got like another sibling, okay, and you've got your mom who's not an alcoholic. And like you're just trying to kind of get to the next day every day. Really, right? It's like you're walking on eggshells all the time. You're like, wow, is this guy going to blow up? Is this guy going to hit me again? Is this guy going to like not be home? Am I going to find this guy drunk, passed out? Like, you don't know. So the coping mechanism that you create in that situation is probably needed, right? Like, I think this is kind of where the spiritual community gets it really wrong. We're like, well, if I was just like always love and like if I'm just always open, like nothing bad can happen to me. It's like, well, sure, but like if there's a guy chasing you with a knife, you don't just stop and be like, I'm just gonna be in love, and then the guy like stabs you to death, and then you're dead. It's like, no, like that's like you got to have some discernment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you have to have some discernment. And then, like, look, I've lived in that spot where it's just like, I am everything. And it's just like, you're just convincing yourself again.
Yeah. Honestly, it's another behavioral pattern.
It is. And so,
Living in what's true.
no. Okay. Anyways,
You
so
were saying,
sorry about that. We had technical difficulties. Um, Not tech people. Borrow this thing from tech people. If there's anything like when this thing actually, when we actually need a tech person, that'll be great because then we don't have to deal with this stuff.
they'll be able to explain that halo that came around me as I moved in and out of the camera at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
There's lots of things. It might actually just be, anyways, doesn't matter. So I think that the thing about the quantum entanglement stuff and like the entanglement that we were talking about, right? Like that's kind of, that's definitely the stuff that Roshi and I have worked on for a long time. It's identifying the entanglements, and then from there, hold on, I don't want it to say. Identifying the entanglements, because I find that 99% of it is identification. Like once you illuminate to the universe, there's something that you want to change. Um, it seems to be like the 1% is just finding out the modality that helps you change it, whether that's like sending love to it or meditating on it or deep breathing on it or you know smoking a ton of marijuana. I don't know. Like it comes down to like what works for you. And then you need feedback. Like the feedback part is extremely important. I think that's the thing. But everybody has entanglements. It's kind of like when I was at the Vipassana, right? Like everybody's got sankharas, these however you want to call it, right? You could have sankharas that are from past lives. You could have sankharas that aren't even yours. They could be ancestral sankharas that just got passed on to you. And everybody's created a sankhara in this life. That's the whole point of repair, to repair that sankhara. And then on that person's side, and then also inside yourself, like, move on from it. Make sure that there's nothing left of it so that you can then work on the stuff that's happened in past lives. So, but even then, like, let's say you don't believe on the,
What's a sankara?
Oh, like a Sankara is like what is the exact definition of a Sankara? I don't have Safari on my phone, so I have to like find like a way to get out. Anyways, Sankara.
I love that you deleted that.
Oh yeah, I did. It's like a so like a Sankara is like an emotional impurity that's stored in the body. And like they've done research to show that like you store emotions at a cellular level inside yourself. Um, so like that's why we're like, if you do something you feel like, like, I don't like you're like let's say like, you yell at your dad and your back hurts like every single time. It's like, okay, well, you probably got something stored there. Maybe. It's probably at least worth looking into, like maybe it's a coincidence. Probably isn't, but maybe. And so, and like you can call it whatever you want. Like Sankara is the same, in my opinion, as an entanglement. It's like the entanglements, it's these entanglements because you can have entanglements with yourself. Now that's an esoteric thing. We can talk about that in a later podcast. You could talk about that a whole session about the the entanglement inside yourself, and that's not kind of where I want to start because I want this to kind of be more of like a happy meal for people. I don't want to go to like the 15th item down on the McDonald's menu that no one orders. Okay, it's like, no one orders whatever that is. I don't even know what that would be, but I don't want to go there. I don't want to start on the outer rim. I want to start like where it's a little bit more approachable because
I love that I'm part of a happy
yeah, it's what it is. It's like you want it to be like the happy meal, and that's where I want to stay for a lot of it. Like you get a toy, you get something.
meal. Okay, what's the toy?
It could be anything, right? Like I remember when I was a kid, you used to get like these like goalie masks for McDonald's, or you get like, or
Wow.
there was nothing like, yeah, I have them.
Really?
Yeah,
Like full on face mask?
like they were like this big. They're like pretty cool.
Okay. Our toys were like 2 inches by 2 inches.
Yeah, you get that too, though. You can get like a little transformer or like a Pokemon, or I always loved the Monopoly. The Monopoly was great.
Sure that your parents were just buying you presents.
No, it's what I got. Like I got that. I don't know if I actually got like a Pokemon or a Transformer. I'm just saying like they'd be like small, right? I'm just saying that these ones that I got were like relatively big and they're pretty cool.
I feel like maybe our little toy can be a practice or something to try.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a good thing. And I think the practice is you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the practice is like just start noticing things. Like I am a recovering hypochondriac, okay? And I used to, I think that you and I share this. When things would happen to me, my first instinct was to think that I'm dying. And so it's back in 2013, I had this experience happen to me where I was living in a condo at the time with my wife. She was studying she ended up, my wife and I met at Morgan Stanley. We were investment bankers. And then she left and I left. And then she went on to pursue medicine and she became a doctor. And so she was back in university and she was studying for some exam or something like that. But I was doing research for March Madness. This is way more important, right? I gotta win my March Madness pool. And I don't think I've ever won either, which is like really funny about that. It's like one of those things where you're just like always a bridesmaid, never win. I'm sure there's people who listen to this who play fantasy football that feel that way too. At least won that, which feels good. Um, so I remember I was sitting, not like on the floor. We had like this blue couch that we used to have. And I was sitting on the floor, resting my back on it. We had this like white kind of shaggy carpet. I was watching TV and I was like on my phone, like doing on my computer on my phone, doing research for March Madness. And then out of nowhere, I felt this like water falling down my neck. And like, I mean, like I touch my neck and there's no water. And I mean, it's like dripping down my neck. And I'm like, oh no, I think I'm fucking dying. Maybe I'm having like a fucking brain aneurysm or something like that. And then the fucking panic starts. Then it's like your whole body goes into fight or flight. Your my palms are sweaty. And like, look, I'd had anxiety before, you know, like I definitely was probably like a more anxious kid. Not to the point where it's like it was bad, but like I mean, like I was definitely more of an anxious kid. And I mean, like I'm freaking out. I'm walking around trying to get rid of it. Won't go away. I'm living in Calgary. It's like minus 35 degrees out or 30 degrees out or something like that. Super cold. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go on my balcony. That makes sense. Go on the balcony, get this just like this cold air envelop me. And it's like, nope, still there. Right. I'm like, oh God. So then like I'm on the 23rd floor. So I like look over the edge and I'm like, yeah, that could get rid of it. So you contemplate it. You're like, this sucks. All right, I'm not gonna do that. Don't want to jump off the bridge. So then I like come back in, still having this panic attack. So I'm like, I need to go like walk around the block. So I'm like, okay, but I don't want to walk around alone. It's like, what if I die? Like someone needs to be there to call the ambulance. So I go into my wife's room and I'm like, we need to go outside. We need to go for a walk. She's like, it's minus 30 out. I'm like, I don't care. We need to go. And then she's like, I'm studying. And then I just start to like panic and I start to like cry. And I'm like, no, like we need to go. We need to go. And she's like, okay, like we'll go. Walk around. And I'd say from then on, this is where my hypochondria got really bad. Like I used to not be able to get my blood taken. I'd pass out. That sucked. But like that really difficult for me to get needles. But that was kind of like in like, yeah, like would I like create things in my head? Sure. But this was a whole new thing. So I remember I would wake up with sweaty palms. I would go to bed with sweaty palms. Um, I couldn't go in crowds, couldn't go see movies. I remember we went to try to go see Silver Linings Playbook. This is not a horror film. And I'll never forget when like the guy's going up the stairs, I had this vision that like there's this dead person in the freaking bathtub. It's not what happens. Bradley Cooper just goes up and this dude's having sex with his wife and like he's like, can you let me finish? And I'm like having this like panic attack in there. And this had happened to me before in movies, but it was like I like had to leave and I was gonna pass out. And like anyway, so I'm going, it's just happening. So what would happen to me was I would get a ton of different symptoms. So like I would have my left ring finger and my pinky go numb and they'd just be numb for like a day. And then like that would happen. And then like I'd get this like facial like weird thing where like I feel like my right cheek was like frozen. And then like I'd have sweaty palms or I'd be like hot all the time. Or like I would feel like my left leg and I'd have all these symptoms. And like I had a psychologist at the time and I'm like, I'm not taking drugs. Screw that. I'm gonna like feel all this stuff. And I had a great doctor too, because I go see my doctor and like I thought I had every major neurological disease known to man. I was actually a very large help to my wife when she was in the neurology rotation because I was like, oh yeah, there's that or this or that. And it's like, oh yeah, what about that? And she's like, oh God. And I was like, oh yeah, I thought I had all this stuff. I remember like I think the lowest point I ever had outside of being on that balcony was I was in the Vancouver airport and I'm sitting there and it's horrible. And then like my hand's kind of doing something. So I'm like sitting there like this, like staring at my hand, to figure out like if I have a tremor, and then trying to figure out like, okay, like what does like a 1 megahertz tremor look like, or like whatever the fuck they, like anyways. And it was awful. It was awful. And I think, part of that was I actually found a way to be back in my body 100%. Okay.
Mhm.
Then I found a way to dissociate like 4 years later, and that was awesome. But like that's not sustainable. Okay. Because it's like I could go get my blood taken, I could do all this stuff, like every relationship was falling apart. Then I meet Roshi and I get back into my body, same thing. All this crazy stuff happens to me again, but I'm like, okay. So the point of that long-winded story was it's like it's just a navigation tool. Okay. Like you'll know if something bad's happening. Back to what I said at the start. I had my 4 layer dream. I woke up. I'm like, something's wrong. Okay. Like you'll start to understand when you get more proprioception with your body, you'll know the difference between this and that. Not to say that it's not hard. I still have times like, this month alone, like you and I were talking about this, like I had like twitches all over my body. Okay. You know, do not think it's a spiritual experience. It could be. Go get your blood taken. You know, that's the whole thing. Go get your blood taken just to see, just make sure you're okay. Um, but I think that that's the thing. It's like just start to notice things, start to notice patterns. Like it could be really simple things, like you know, you like ask your you ask your partner about how the weather is, and she like snaps back at you like the weather sucks. And then if you do that over and over and over and over and over again, it's like, oh, okay, like what's that? What's going on there? Where do I feel it? Do I feel it in my foot? Do I feel it in my back? Do I feel it in my eye? Like, where do I feel this stuff? I think the biggest thing is just start to like rekindle that relationship with feeling again, and then testing it. Do things change? Like, like maybe it's just like, like there are people that I know that like the minute I walk in the room, it's like things change. I don't even know why. I could be the nicest person in the whole entire world, and it's just like it's just different. I don't know why. Like, I work on myself a lot. I really care about that. I care about raising my vibration. But you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm like a disrupting force to them. I don't know. Or maybe they just don't like me. That's okay. It doesn't matter how much work you do. They just don't like you. That's okay. It's okay. But as long as you know these things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's something in what you were saying about being curious here that I think is so important, which is, I think as we get older, we're taught a lot that being curious requires an answer. Like we're asking questions because we want answers, a definitive answer. And so much of noticing is asking questions and then really feeling the response, as opposed to having there be a dedicated, this is the answer. I kind of think of it as if you're small and you're presented with like an orchid for the first time. You're not trying to find the answer of the orchid. You're just trying to figure out, what is this?
Totally.
What's it like? What's it smell like? What's it feel like? Does it have a taste? Right? You use all your senses to try to work out what it is. And that's I think the sensation of going through life and noticing things is just noticing, oh, what am I feeling? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? What is happening in my body right now?
Yeah. I think that's it. It's like, that's kind of the first part of kind of coming home. I think we're all kind of taught a little bit to dissociate.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like some stuff's like really hard to deal with. Like some stuff's really difficult to deal with. And I think that there's like, if that's what you want to do, that's okay. Like, no one's here to judge anybody. And I don't think anybody can tell somebody how to live or what to do. Um, and I also think that like, and what I also think is that the other thing is, it's like, like people say, oh, well, you hear all these dumb colloquial things like, oh, no one can do anything of importance past the age of 40. And like, no one can, no one can, sorry, I'm using my wife's computer. She has Messenger on here, and that's so annoying. I really hope when people listen to this, they just laugh.
What's Messenger?
Like iMessage. She says iMessage on her Mac. So like,
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
and so it's just like ding,
Oh.
ding. And I'm like, hopefully I can get rid of that. But it's so funny. I actually think it's better when it's like this. It's like then it's like not overproduced. No one gives a shit. They're like, oh, this is kind of funny. Still there.
Truthful.
Yeah, it's truthful. Um, but yeah, like I think that there's if you want to be in your body and you want to try it and you want to notice things, great. I think that that's like it's works for me. Obviously, it works for you. Um, but I think that anybody can be curious. I think we live in like I think like our world is very limiting at times. Like it's like, well, you can't do that, and it's like let's solve for yes. Like let's not solve for no. Solving for no is super easy. Like I've worked in finance for a long time. Like that's essentially what finance does. It's like they say no first. They say no first. Then they breathe. And they're like, what was even the pitch? I don't even know what I said no to. Okay. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of someone that like I see as someone who is constantly being curious and creative. So there's a guy named Jimmy Iovine. He started something called Interscope, just a record label. And he started off his career like he didn't go to college. He didn't do anything. Like he didn't like barely passed. He like wasn't a very good student, according to him. And he wanted to be in music. So he ended up getting a few jobs in music and he got fired. And then he got his third job. Like, he's telling his aunt was like a really successful musician. She was like, eventually when someone gets fired twice, you're like not really that excited about giving them a third opportunity. But thank God I got a third opportunity at the record plant. And he's like, my big break was actually working on John Lennon's, working with John Lennon. Like, how cool of an experience is that? Like there's a guy that I know, his name's Jared Dillian, and he says that like you don't um find luck in your bedroom. Like you got to get out into the world. And so the point that I'm saying about Jimmy is that, like, so he went out there and did this, and well, let me just see something because that's super annoying. That's like the most annoying thing I've ever heard in my life.
The messages.
Oh yeah, play sound effects. There we go. Done. Um, so he starts off doing that. He's a record producer. He has some failures, right? Like he's like I went and worked with Foghead because I wanted the money and blew up and got fired and and then he's like, I was sad, and anyways, like his next big break was he did Born to Run with Bruce Springsteen, and that's kind of what started his career, right? Then he got to the point where it's like, I don't want to be a producer anymore. He wanted to start a record label, so he started Interscope. And the point that I'm trying to make is that, you know, Jimmy Iovine redefined himself a lot. Like, he's old, he's not like 40, like he's in his like 60s or 70s now. And he reinvented himself like three times in his life. He started off as a record producer. He then, not even a record producer, he was like an engineer. Like he just was a guy on the board. And then he became a producer. Then he became then he produced the producers. And then he started a record label. Then he started Beats, headphones, and Apple Music. And he did like a lot of cool stuff. Like this whole notion that you can't be curious you can only be curious when you're a kid. You can only be curious when you're like in your teenage years. You can be curious whenever you want. And that aspect of you is there all the time at any given moment. And all you have to do is kind of come home and find it, right? It's not that difficult. Like if you have some cool idea, do it. Like if you see things, the more you are on, the more aligned you are with the universe, the more amazing things happen. Like and some people are a little bit luckier than others. I feel like I'm one of those luckier people. Like I've had a lot of really great guardian angels or spirits or whatever you want to call them that like show up and help me out when I need it because I've needed a lot of help. But that doesn't mean that you can't have that too. Doesn't mean that you can't shift your being just a little bit. That's the point. It's like, it doesn't mean that you need to become like Jesus Christ. Like, this whole point that I think you and I are trying to make is like, it could just be like where you shift yourself just a little bit so that you find more harmony in your life, or you find that you're just a nicer person, or that you find that, like you're a more giving person, or you find that you're a lot more process driven than content driven. Like you just,
More free or more content.
yeah, lots of that. And I think that it all comes back to feeling things if you want.
Yeah. And if you don't want, okay.
That's okay. There's no right answer. I think that that's the point. I think anybody that tells you they have the answer is just not, they don't have the answer. They're just trying to co-opt you. And I think both of us, we've known people that would do that. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to, you never know what the light is until you see the dark. It's kind of like that whole Adam and Eve parable, right? They had no idea what the Garden of Eden was until they were sent to freaking purgatory or wherever it was. Did I say that right?
You went like what for that one. And so it's looking funny because it sounded weird.
That's fine. I'll edit that out. Um, no, like you don't, Adam and Eve didn't know what the Garden of Eden was until they got kicked out.
Yeah.
Like you don't know, like it's like if you're a fish, you don't know that you're in water until someone tells you that you're in water, and then you're like, what the hell is water? You need the perspective, you need the discernment, you need to like the difference. You have to be able to feel what it's like when things are going well, and then also deal with the impermanence of the fact that things might not go that way 100% of the time. I think that's kind of where the ego is, right? It's kind of like when a system gets to perfect harmony, it's usually when the system changes and breaks down and something new is born. I think that we're all sitting here trying to find this like perfect harmony when in reality it's all impermanent. And you have to accept that.
Yeah, it's not living, I guess, in a way. If
Yeah.
everything is kind of blissful all the time.
Yeah. You can have, and I think there's a difference to that too, though, Allison. You can have inner bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the external can be doing whatever it's doing. That's the point, right? That's the whole point of kind of coming back into your body, feeling things, seeing things. Oh, hey, this is what happens when this happens, or this is what happens when this happens. I feel this when this happens, or like whatever it is. Then you can, then you get, that's how you end up gaining discernment. It's like, oh, it's like if I sell nuclear arms to this person, I get this searing headache. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's like good to know. I think that they talk about that with Truman, where, you know, he like drops these bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And he thinks it's a great thing, but then he starts to have these like horrific headaches and he can't sleep. And like there are things that are like happening to him that he doesn't really understand. Right. That's the universe being like, yo, like we need to get in touch with you because the army actually wants to fire another one, without your authority. I remember Groves goes to him. It was like, we've got another one. He's like, no, I'm not dropping another one without my okay. And you know. I think that's the whole point. You got to feel.
Yes. And also, I, I, I don't really know because I'm in a process, but my sense is that the idea of inner bliss or inner peace really, as a goal, ends up distorting a lot of the actual experience
Agreed.
to have this feeling of inner peace. So that's why I'm sort of like, I think it's really important to not have there be these goals, but to, yeah, it's like that feels like a sales pitch, you know, not in that it's not achievable, but that it orients people towards a state that um that doesn't feel like contentment. I feel like contentment is a more accurate description of the experience, because contentment is sort of whatever's happening internally, it still feels okay. Whereas peace is like, it's like trying to achieve a static state. And that's just not, at least in my experience, it's like not a thing you do if you're interacting with the world, because the world is intentionally trying to move your internal state. So contentment is being okay with that as opposed to like wanting it to be a certain way.
No, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. It can't be prescriptive. There's this thing they do in shamanism. So there's this program that they have with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, which is a three-year kind of intensive. And you go 2 weeks a year to like a retreat, and like you're just there only doing shamanic work, and you're not actually allowed to share anything. And the reason for that is the guy that I see, Wade Purpich, he tells us like the reason we don't share anything with that program is because we don't want anybody coming in with predetermined goals. They even talk about that in Vipassana, right? Like even Goenka talks about it, the guy that kind of created like the kind of brought Vipassana all over the world with the Vipassana Foundation. He was just like, man, like I'm there, like I'm there, and you're not allowed to talk, right? But like people would be like, oh, I saw lightning. It's like, oh, I didn't see lightning. So it's like, oh, I need to see the lightning now. Like if I don't see the lightning, then like it's not like I'm not seeing it. Or it's like, or maybe I'm doing something wrong, or like maybe I'm not a good Vipassana. Maybe this isn't for me. It's like, well, no, like the point of silence and the point of it being a silent retreat is because it's just supposed to be for you. It's supposed to be your experience. So I completely agree with you, Allison. The goal isn't to feel inner bliss or any of that kind of stuff. I think at the end of the day, you have to determine your own goal or whatever it is, right? Like, and the goal can change or the desire can change or whatever that is, right? Like, maybe the desire is just to be like, hey, I want to be able to feel as much as I possibly can. Okay. And then maybe it shifts from there. I don't know. If anything, like, you got to continue that state of process, right? You don't want to be in content where you're like, I need this. So it's like you see it all the time in entrepreneurship where like guys like, oh, I created this company and I sold it, and they're still miserable. Actually, they're more miserable after they sell than they were when they were trying to sell it, because they lost process, right? The whole point was starting the company. That was the process, right? They were building something and then they sell it, and now they're like, now what? It's not as if like some door opens in the freaking space-time continuum is like, come with me. Like you sold your business now, and like you have achieved this level. It's like, we're like in Mario, you gotta go down some freaking like some little like manhole, and you like go, whoop, whoop, whoop. You like go down, you're like, oh, I made it to the new level. No, you didn't. You just didn't. No, you're left with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. I think that you're right. Like I appreciate you saying that, because I like, anybody listening, I'm wrong about what I said before. Like you can't stay chased. So I apologize for saying that.
Well, I don't know, right or wrong, just different way of looking at it.
No, it's just a different way of looking at it. But I think the way you're looking at it's correct in the sense that it's like, yes, it's not, it's more about being curious. Curiosity is the kind of the path forward.
Yeah. And also then it allows you to have a bit more freedom. There's something about the prescriptive sort of spiritual path that I find really restrictive.
Yeah.
Right? That like it's supposed to look like this, you're supposed to do that, you're supposed to have this experience. And then I notice that people feel like then, well, kind of like what you said, like I'm not making progress because I haven't had this experience, or I'm not yet psychic, so I must not be totally open, or I must be faulty in some way. And then it becomes this really interesting sort of quest for self-improvement that never ends. Um, that becomes almost like its own obsession, right?
For sure.
Getting better, better, and like to what end? Like other than to emulate something else that you've seen in somebody else. So it's like it's almost like becomes a mirror to the material perspective, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think like you have to want to do it because you want to do it. You know, like I don't think anybody should advocate it's like, well, you need to like remove all your impurities or you need to remove all your entanglements. It's like, what does that mean? I don't know. This is what I'm working on. This is what I'm choosing to do. This is what I want to do. It's my life though, right? It's kind of like what your teacher said. It's like, you know, sit with it. Let me know if you actually want to know. It's like what I always say to people, right? Like once you get wisdom, doesn't mean that it isn't distorting. Like I think that's also where the spiritual community gets it wrong. They just think it's all just bliss and love and harmony. And it's like, like my experience has not been that. My experience has been an unbelievable amount of like, not hardship, but just like, it's been a journey. Yeah. And it's been complicated and it's been confusing at times and it's been hard and it's been painful and it's been awesome too. But, you know, I remember like, but you know, back to the whole state chasing thing, right? Like I remember talking to Roshni about this and she would be like, oh, Liam, like I've been going through something and I was like on the floor crying for like a while today. And I always just be like, what the fuck is this person talking about? Like, I don't have this experience. Like, okay, whatever. And then I have it. And I'm like, wow, okay, now I know what she's talking about. This is like that. This is heavy. But but the thing that Roshni was very good about was she was like, this is how I'm going through it, Leighton. This doesn't mean that this is how you should go through it. You should go through it the way that you're supposed to go through it, not seeking things out. Things come to you. It's kind of how I look at it, right? Like wisdom passes through you. Okay, you don't go and take it, imbibe it. It passes through you at the time it needs to pass through you. You don't, um, this isn't like something that you work at. Like I must figure out how to gain more wisdom. It's like, that just sounds fucking moronic.
No matter how many books you read.
Oh, I think actually the books are the problem. I can't read spiritual books anymore. Or like I can, but it's more like, oh, okay. You know, you read enough of them, they're all the same. Now, I'm not saying that these spiritual books are bad, right? Like there's so many people in the world, right? Everybody has to find a different way there. Um, and they all say the same thing, right? It's like we come back to this whole notion of what is the like the hardest things to do or the easiest things to do, right? It's like anytime it's something
the simplest thing.
Yeah, the simplest things.
They're not easy.
No, they're sorry, the simplest things. Correct. That's even better. Like be present. Okay, great. Try being present on your phone, like not mindlessly scrolling. Like be present. Be present 100% of the time. It's hard. It's super difficult. And be present every day at all times. It's difficult. But that's kind of the like this the that's the thing that you and I are talking about, right? It's like, hey, let's just slowly but surely bring us back. Um, I think but yeah, I'll use a golf example. Okay. Golf explains this so well because golf's like one of the only sports out there that like everybody tries to hack their way to being Tiger Woods. It's like, this guy is this guy like you want to watch a guy like walk on water, like go watch Tiger Woods in 2001. The guy was doing something different. Like go back and watch the 2000 or 2001 US Open at Pebble Beach. Like it is like it's different watching this guy because he's like so there. Like he's like it's like, oh, it's almost emotional even thinking about like how present this man was playing golf. Like it was like he was a god and everybody else was a peon at that golf tournament. And the reason I bring up golf is because, like I've been fortunate enough to be pretty good at it. I've played in a lot of really big tournaments around North America. I haven't really had that great of results, but I've had to have good results to get into the good tournaments. And what I've learned is that like the simplest task is difficult for the ego to accept. So like in golf, right? Golf's the only sport in which you don't practice on the actual canvas you play on. So like when you play basketball, okay, you practice on a basketball court. Here. You know, as long as the net is 10 feet high and as long as you're playing on a hard surface, like yeah, hardwood maybe be a little different than concrete and whatnot, but like the ball bounces pretty similarly. Okay. You play in your gymnasium is no different than you playing on the same hardwood floor the Los Angeles Lakers play on. The only difference is that they have, call it 20,000 fans screaming at you, and there's a bunch of lights and cameras and all that kind of stuff. That's the only real difference. In golf, you go to the range, and the range isn't even golf. It's like you hit like your driver 15 times in a row. Like you never do that in golf. You hit your 9 iron 15 times in a row. You never do that unless you like want to do that. You don't do that. And the surface might be different. Like you might have AstroTurf on your driving range, and then on the golf course, it's all grass. Obviously, like so you have this AstroTurf golf course. That'd be ridiculous. And freaking, yeah, let's just destroy the natural landscape. And so like what I've learned, and I've been super fortunate. I've had golf coaches that are so process driven. Like I'll be on the golf course and the guy will be like, I want you to like fall in love with a target. So then we learn how to fall in love with the target. And he's like, like find like a tip of a tree or like a branch that you just like, oh my God, like I love this branch. I know it sounds really stupid. Okay. Like when you say it out loud, people are like, this guy sounds weird. Yeah, I do sound weird. Okay. And just the process of picking a target, okay, gets you present. Because you're no longer figuring out like, well, should my club be up here or here? Like, like this or that. Like, no, that means nothing. Because it takes 1.5 seconds to do a golf swing, 2 maybe. So like, you're gonna tell me that you can like think about that while it's happening? No, you can't. You need to be an athlete. You need to react. So the whole point of focusing on your target is to get you into process. The whole reason why when I talk to people, when I play golf with them, I'm like, you need to walk into the golf ball how you want your swing to feel. So it's like it's really amazing if you watch someone. I remember there was a kid that I used to play a lot of golf with, and he turned pro, and he's his first pro event. It's going to be this summer at the Canadian Open. And I remember playing a match against him, and we're on the 5th hole, the Calgary Golf and Country Club, the place that I'm a member at. and he has like a really short birdie putt. And for not everybody understands, it's like he is putting for 3 on a par 4, and he rams this putt well by the hole. Okay, because he wanted to make it. Because if he makes it, he beats me. And so it goes. It's actually probably further than his last putt was. And I watch it, and he is so fast. His whole thing is fast, right? His process is fast. His pre-shot routine's fast. You can see his hands are fast. And I knew he was going to miss the putt. And he misses the putt. And we walk off the green. He is fuming. And I look at him, and I'm like, look, okay, A, you should never try and make a putt. That's kind of counterintuitive. That's something like Yoda would say. Like, don't make the putt. Don't try to. He's saying it's the little alien guy in some freaking swamp. And the reason why I say that is because the ego gets involved. The ego's like, oh my God, I can't believe I missed that putt. Like I hit such a great shot in there. Like I should win this hole. And then you get all this stuff. It's like, no, you gotta slow down. You gotta get back to your target, get back to your process. Right. So if you walk into that putt super quickly, well, your stroke's gonna be super quick, which means the faster the stroke you have, the more issue you have with your face angle. And then you actually create a heck of a lot more difficulty for you making that putt. Is you're actually not thinking about that putt. You're thinking about the last putt. And so I think that that's the thing. It's like the simplest thing in golf is to pick a really good target. And like, it can't be like a bunker. Look up, like find something that you can really keep in your mind's eye when you're over the golf ball. Like the tip of a tree or a branch or like a stump or like the actual like trunk of a tree or like a flagpole or whatever it is, right? Whatever catches whatever, like you can like be like, wow, like I really like that target. And then you can actually push all the bullshit away and allow the universe to be like, all right, like let's get some harmony here. Same thing in life. It's like that's the whole reason why people want to be present. It's like, be present. Go for dinner, don't be on your phone while you're with somebody. That's the oddest thing I've ever seen. Or even better, like don't be on your Vision Pro when you're at dinner with someone. It's like you're like wearing a ski mask. Like, what are you doing? Hey, who thought that was a good idea?
Whoever invented it.
Probably. But yeah.
Yeah. That feels like a good place to.
I think it's a good place to end too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody taking the time, a couple hours to listen to Allison and I. We're going to be doing this probably once a month. And I feel very fortunate that someone's taken this time to listen to us. I really hope you get something from it. Because I know I have. And Allison, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to everybody listening to the next one when it comes out. Right. Thank you so much. Right. Bye.